Dr. Henry Foster stood in front of the window of Orbital Station 6 and looked down at Earth. The blue planet turned slowly below him, and for a moment he forgot why he was nervous. Then his communication device buzzed. The message made his hands go cold. A ship had arrived. A female wanted to dock. Her name was... Henry's mind went back 15 years, had come to Earth as part of a diplomatic exchange. She was young then, curious about human culture, and she asked questions that made other scientists uncomfortable. Henry remembered her because she was different from other. She smiled. She laughed. She seemed almost human in the way she moved through the station. Then she had left with the rest of the diplomatic group. Henry had not thought about her much after that. Were cold, logical beings. They did not form attachments. That was what the report said. The docking was scheduled for 2 hours from now. Henry decided to be there. When the airlock opened, Henry expected to see unchanged, aged slowly, but the being who emerged was different. Her skin, usually a smooth blue-gray, looked tired. The iridescent markings that ran along her arms seemed dull. Her eyes, which Henry remembered as bright and alert, looked worn and fearful. But that was not what stopped Henry's breath. Behind her came a child. The boy was perhaps 7 or 8 years old. His skin held a faint blue tint, but his face was unmistakably human. Brown eyes, dark hair. The nose and mouth belonged to a human, but the structure of his face held something alien in it, something that should not exist. Henry did not move. He could not move. Saw him and her body relax slightly. She walked forward quickly and placed her hand on the boy's shoulder. Her movements were protective, possessive. This was not the logical, controlled Henry remembered. This was a mother. "Dr. Foster," she said. Her voice carried an accent he had heard many times before, but now it shook with emotion. "I needed to find you. I did not know where else to go." Henry found his voice. "You came back. We did not expect." He could not finish. His eyes stayed on the child. "His name is," said. She squeezed the boy's shoulder gently. "And yes, I came back. I came back because Earth is the only place I thought might understand what he is." Henry gestured for them to follow him. He did not ask questions yet. He led them through the corridors of the station, away from the main docking area where other people would see them. They passed only 2 technicians, and Henry told them to stay busy with their work. He used a tone that made them obey without question. In his private office, Henry sealed the door. Only then did he speak. "This is not possible," he said quietly. "The genetic compatibility studies showed that, and humans could not produce offspring. The biological barriers are too great." Sat down and sat beside her, his small hand gripping hers. "The studies were correct," said. "It should not have been possible, but it happened. He happened." "How?" Henry asked. He was a scientist. He understood the weight of what he was seeing. A hybrid child meant everything the delegation had told Earth about genetic incompatibility was wrong, or incomplete. "There was a researcher here," said slowly. "During the exchange program. His name was Daniel Cooper. He was kind to me. Not because I was an alien to study, but because he saw me as a person. We became close." She stopped and her eyes moved to her son. Henry understood what she was not saying. "Daniel was killed," continued, her voice flat. "A transport accident, they said. I was already pregnant. I did not know at first. When I realized, I hid it. I could not go back to. My government would have destroyed the pregnancy. They would have seen it as contamination." "So you ran," Henry said. "I ran," agreed. "For 9 years I have hidden. I moved from place to place. I changed names. I kept hidden. But the government found me. They sent people to find him, to find us. I do not know how much longer I can run." Henry looked at the boy, watched him with intelligent eyes. The child did not seem afraid of Henry, but he was watchful, smart, aware of danger. "Why come here?" Henry asked. "Why not go somewhere else on Earth, somewhere remote?" "Because Earth is strong," said. Because I knew you were here. You treated me with respect, Dr. Foster. You saw me as a being, not a specimen. And because if they are going to hunt me, I want them to hunt me on your world. Your world has weapons. Your world has militaries. Your world knows how to fight. Henry understood. She was not asking for comfort. She was asking for protection. She was asking for a shield. Before Henry could respond, an alert sounded on his communication system. Captain Robert Collins, the station commander, was requesting his presence in the security office. Urgent. Henry's heart sank. Word must have already spread about the ship and its passengers. Stay here, Henry told. Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone except me. Nodded, she pulled closer to her, and the boy rested his head against her chest. Henry left his office and walked toward the security section. As he walked, his mind raced. The scientific community would want to study. Politicians would want to use him as a tool. They would demand his return, and would fight with everything she had to protect her son. Henry was about to step into the middle of a storm that would change everything. In his office, held her son and whispered words in. Listened, his small fingers gripping his mother's clothing. Outside the window, stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the government was preparing to reclaim what they saw as theirs, but had made her choice long ago. She would die before she let them have. And now, everything would depend on whether the humans would stand with her. The meeting with Captain Collins lasted 3 hours. Henry had explained the situation carefully, leaving out only the details about Daniel Cooper's death that he did not yet have confirmed. Collins was not angry, but he was worried. The government had already sent a message to Earth's diplomatic council. They wanted to know about the ship and its passengers. By the time Henry returned to his quarters, it was late. The station was quiet. Most people slept, but Henry knew would not be sleeping. He keyed the access code and the door slid open. Sat in the darkness, her hand on his head as the boy slept on a chair beside her. She had somehow found blankets and a pillow. She looked up when Henry entered, and he saw raw fear in her eyes. "They know," Henry said simply, sitting down across from her. "How long until they come?" asked. "I do not know. Collins is reporting this to the council. The council will contact the... After that, we are in diplomatic territory. It could be hours or days." Looked down at her sleeping son. "He asked me where his father was. I told him his father was dead. I did not tell him that they killed him." Henry leaned forward. "Tell me about Daniel." So told him. She spoke in a low voice so as not to wake. She described Daniel Cooper as a kind man who studied planetary biology. He had been assigned to work with the delegation because he wanted to understand their physiology from a scientific angle, but something had happened between them beyond science. We are taught that emotions are weakness," said. "We are taught that bonding with other species is contamination. We are taught to be separate, superior. But Daniel showed me something different. He showed me that connection was not weakness, that caring about someone made life better, not worse." "Your government would see that as dangerous," Henry said. "My government sees anything different as dangerous," replied. "When Daniel died, I thought I would die too. I did not want to live. But then I realized I was pregnant. And suddenly, living became the only thing that mattered, because was a part of Daniel, was proof that what we had was real." She reached down and touched her son's hair with careful fingers. "I ran to a colony on the edge of space, a place where they do not ask many questions. I worked there and raised and taught him both languages. I wanted him to know where he came from, both sides of him, but I also wanted him to understand that his father's people are worth knowing." Henry listened to the story unfold, described years of constant fear. She moved whenever she sensed danger. She changed names and identities. She kept isolated because she was terrified that if anyone discovered what he was, the government would come. "But they found you anyway," Henry said. "Yes," said. 3 months ago I saw them, agents. They were asking questions about a boy with unusual features. I took and ran again. But this time I had nowhere left to go. I was running out of worlds where I could hide, so I came here, to Earth, to you. Why me specifically? Henry asked. Because you were the only human who ever treated me like I mattered, said simply. You never looked at me like I was a specimen to be studied or a tool to be used. You looked at me like I was real. Henry felt the weight of that responsibility settle on him. One act of kindness 15 years ago, and now he was caught in the middle of an interstellar conflict. Needs to understand what is happening, Henry said. He is intelligent. He will sense the truth. I know, said, but he is so young. How do I tell him that his own people want to destroy him because of what he is? The same way any parent tells a child about the difficult things in life, Henry replied. Honestly, with love, and with the promise that you will protect him. Looked at her son's face, peaceful in sleep. I will die before I let them take him. I know you will, Henry said, but maybe we can find a way that does not require that sacrifice. They talked through the night. Henry asked questions about health and development. To his surprise, had complete medical records. She had somehow accessed human medical databases from isolated colonies and kept detailed notes. Showed no signs of the genetic instability that scientists had predicted a hybrid would have. In fact, his development seemed normal, perhaps even advanced. When morning came, Henry made a decision. He would bring in Dr. Sarah, the station's chief medical officer. He would tell her the truth and he would ask for her help. Collins already knew the situation. If more people understood the facts, perhaps compassion would win over fear. There is one more thing, said as dawn light came through the window. Daniel, the accident. I never believed it was an accident. Why not? Henry asked, though he already suspected the answer. Because I investigated it later, said. When I was on the colony, I found records. The transport maintenance logs showed nothing wrong, but there was a security official on Earth at the time, an official who worked for the government's Biological Integrity Division. He was in the area the day Daniel died. Henry felt anger rise in him. You think they killed him deliberately? I think they killed him because they were afraid of what he was becoming, said. They were afraid of what we were becoming. They were afraid that if humans and could bond, it would challenge everything they taught us about genetic purity. We need to prove this, Henry said. Can we? Asked. Can we prove it before they destroy my son? Henry did not have an answer. He only knew that the game had changed. This was no longer just about a hybrid child. This was about whether the government had committed murder to maintain their ideology. And if it was true, then everything was about to become much more complicated. Woke up as the station came alive with the morning shift. He looked around, confused at first, then he saw his mother and remembered. She pulled him close and held him tight. What happens now? Asked in careful English, the language his mother had taught him to value. Now, Henry said, we fight for you, all of us together. The boy looked at this human stranger and nodded slowly. He seemed to understand in the way that children do that everything had changed. There was no more hiding. There was only forward. The diplomatic council chamber was tense. Captain Collins stood at the head of the table, and around it sat representatives from every major nation on Earth. They all had the same expression, confusion mixed with worry. Dr. Sarah had confirmed Henry's findings, was healthy. The boy showed no signs of genetic instability. His cognitive abilities were, in fact, above average for a human child his age. The medical data contradicted everything the government had claimed about hybrid offspring. So what you are telling us, said Ambassador David Washington from the North American Union, is that they lied to us about genetic compatibility. Not lied, Henry said carefully. Incomplete information. It may be that hybrid offspring are rare and require specific conditions, but the claim that they are impossible or inherently unstable is false. And the government knows this, asked Ambassador from the European coalition. I believe they do, Henry said. A researcher would have found the same evidence we did, which means they chose not to share it. The room fell silent. The implications hung in the air like a weight. 3 days after the council meeting, a message arrived from the government. They demanded the immediate return of and the hybrid child. The message was not a request. It was an ultimatum with a deadline, 72 hours. During those 3 days, something unexpected happened. A journalist named Lisa Morgan, who worked for the Earth News Network, somehow got the story. She began investigating Daniel Cooper's death. The transport accident that had killed him 15 years ago suddenly became interesting again. Lisa was a good journalist. She was the kind who asked questions that made people uncomfortable. She tracked down maintenance records that should have been archived. She found the names of officials who had been on station at the time. And she found something else. A security officer named Vexkel had been on Earth right before Daniel's death. Lisa's investigation expanded. She discovered that Vexkel had returned to just after Daniel died. She found statements from other station workers who said they had seen him near the transport facility. She built a case that was not definitive but was compelling. The death of Daniel Cooper had been no accident. When Lisa published her findings, the reaction on Earth was immediate and powerful. Humans were angry. The idea that the government had killed one of their own to prevent a relationship with an alien felt like an act of war. Public opinion swung hard in its favor. But Captain Collins had more pressing concerns. The warship that had brought was still in orbit, and now it had been joined by 2 more. They were taking position at the edge of Earth's controlled space. They were not attacking, but they were there, watching, waiting. The council held emergency meetings. Some nations wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to prepare for military action. Some wanted to simply give and to avoid conflict. We cannot do that, Henry said at one of these meetings. If we give them up, we send a message that we will abandon anyone who seeks our protection when it becomes difficult. And if we refuse and they attack, asked General, the commander of Earth's space forces, are you willing to start an interstellar war for one alien woman and a child? If that is what is necessary, Henry said, but I do not think it will come to that. He was not certain of this, but he believed it, and in the face of so much uncertainty, belief was sometimes all you had. And waited in Henry's quarters. They did not watch the news, said it would only make more afraid. Instead, they read books and played games and tried to maintain some sense of normalcy in a situation that was anything but normal. But was not stupid. He knew something was wrong. Are they going to take me away? He asked his mother one evening, his small face serious. Knelt down to his level. No, I will not allow it. They will try, though, said. It was not a question. Yes, said. She did not soften the truth. They will try. But Dr. Foster and the humans here, they are going to help us. We are not alone anymore, do you understand? Nodded slowly. He seemed to accept this with a calmness that broke Henry's heart. The boy should have been playing and laughing. Instead, he was learning about survival. On the 68th hour of the ultimatum, things changed. Henry was in his office when Captain Collins contacted him. Get and the boy to the conference center. Bring them to the diplomatic chambers. Do not ask questions, just do it. When they arrived, the council was assembled, and this time there were not just government officials. There were scientists, doctors, teachers, journalists. These were people who had seen Lisa's investigation. These were people who had read the evidence. These were people who had made a decision. The council voted. It took only minutes. By a majority vote, Earth offered asylum to and full protection to. The vote was not unanimous. Some nations abstained. Some voted against. But enough nations supported it. The government will not like this, Ambassador Washington said. They will see it as a rejection of their authority. Then they will have to learn to accept rejection, replied Ambassador. We have the right to protect those who come to us for help. Henry looked at. Her eyes were wide, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked like she might cry. Stood between them, small and brave, and he smiled. Captain Collins stood up. I will inform the ships, and I will prepare our defenses. If they want this child, they will have to go through us first. It was a declaration, a line drawn in space and policy. Henry felt something settle in his chest. It was not relief exactly. It was more like purpose. The Council had made its choice. Now they would see if humanity could back up its words with action. The warships began moving closer. The warships took battle positions at the edge of human-controlled space. Their weapons came online. Earth's defensive grid lit up in response. The station went into lockdown, and all non-essential personnel were moved to protected sectors. Sat in a secure room deep inside the station, her hand gripping his hand. Around them, military personnel moved in organized chaos. Captain Collins had placed armed guards at every entrance. The boy and his mother were the most protected beings on the station. An ultimatum came from the lead ship. They had calculated that Earth would fold. Humans, they believed, would choose comfort over conflict. They did not understand that they had already won something greater. They had shown humans that they would sacrifice to protect the innocent, and that changed everything. What happens if they attack? Asked his mother. His voice was small but steady. Then we will be protected, said, and the humans will respond. But was not comforted by this. The boy's young mind worked through the logic of war. If ships fought ships, people died. He did not want people to die because of him. That night made a decision. He waited until his mother slept, until the guards changed shift, and he slipped out of the secure room. He had studied the station layout. His mother had taught him to notice details, to understand how spaces connected. He moved like a small ghost through corridors and passages. Lisa Morgan found him 2 hours later. The journalist was walking through a corridor on her way to the communications center when she nearly tripped over the boy. Stood calmly, looking up at her with dark eyes. I need to go to the ship, said. Lisa's first instinct was to alert security, but something in the boy's expression stopped her. There was no fear in him. There was only determination. Why, she asked. Because if I go to them, they will not attack the station, said simply. My mother is safe here. The humans are safe here. I am the problem. I will go to them. Lisa understood what this child was trying to do. He was trying to die nobly. He was trying to save everyone by sacrificing himself. It was the kind of thing heroes did in stories. But Lisa was a journalist, and journalists understood the power of truth more than they understood anything else. Come with me, she said. She took to the communications center. The technician there knew Lisa and did not question her when she said she needed to use the broadcast system. What Lisa did next was either brilliant or insane. She set up a connection that would broadcast directly to the warships. What is your name? She asked. The boy replied. What are you? She asked. I am, said, what my mother and father made together. I am inhuman. Lisa activated the broadcast. The signal went out across the communication channels that all 3 ships monitored. Began to speak. He spoke in English first, his young voice clear and strong. He told the ships who he was. He told them about his mother, who had given up everything to keep him alive. He told them about his father, Daniel Cooper, a human scientist who had shown his mother kindness and love. Then switched to. His accent was young, not perfect, but it was fluent. He spoke the language of his people with a voice that held no fear. I am speaking to you, he said in his mother's language, not as a hybrid abomination but as a child made by love between 2 beings from different worlds. My father is dead. Your government made sure of that, but I am alive. And I am not defective. I am not broken. I am proof that your fear is wrong. The boy paused. His small hands gripped the edge of the communication console. "I do not want to be a weapon," continued. "I do not want to be studied and dissected to see what makes me different. I do not want to be destroyed because I challenge what you believe about yourselves. I just want to live. I want to know my mother and my human family. I want to learn from both worlds. Is that so terrible that I must die?" His voice grew stronger as he spoke. "You can kill me," he said. "You can destroy this station. You can prove that the government is so afraid of change that it will murder children to prevent it. Or you can let me live. You can show that your species is great enough to accept something new, something that challenges your old ideas, something that says unity is possible." He took a breath. "I am asking you," the 8-year-old boy said to 3 warships, "to be better than your fear, to be better than your government expects you to be." The broadcast ended. The silence that followed was absolute. On the ships, soldiers and officers heard the words of a hybrid child. Some dismissed him. Some were unmoved by his words. But some, particularly younger who had grown up hearing different stories about humans, felt something shift inside them. The commander of the lead ship was a practical man named Vex. He had been given orders to retrieve the child by any means necessary, but he was also a father. He had children of his own, and he had just heard a child speak with more courage than many soldiers possessed. Vex made a choice. He ordered the weapon systems to stand down. The 2 other ships followed his command. The threat was not gone, but it was reduced. The warships pulled back from their aggressive stance and moved into a waiting pattern. Henry Foster watched from the command center as the readings changed. The military personnel around him let out breaths they had been holding. Captain Collins turned to him. "What just happened?" "Humanity won," Henry said quietly. "Not through weapons, not through diplomacy, but through a child's honesty." Was brought to the communications center. She saw her son and pulled him into her arms, tears finally breaking free. She did not scold him. She only held him and whispered words of love and gratitude in human languages. The government sent a new message. They were withdrawing the warships. They did not explain their reasons. They did not admit they were wrong, but they were leaving. Earth held its breath as the ships powered down and began to move away from human space. The war had been averted, not because either side backed down from fear, but because one small boy had the courage to face his hunters and appeal to something greater than hatred. Lisa Morgan filed her story. The hybrid boy's broadcast was already spreading across human networks, but more importantly, it was spreading across networks too. Young were watching a child of their own species defend his right to exist and his right to love. Seeds were being planted. The immediate crisis was over, but the real war, the war between fear and acceptance, between isolation and connection, was only beginning. 1 year had passed. The scars were still visible, but they were healing. The building that stood on the outskirts of Geneva was sleek and modern. The words above the entrance read, "Institute for Cross-Species Understanding." Dr. Henry Foster stood beside it, watching as workers made final preparations for the opening ceremony. Walked toward him at her side. The boy had grown taller. He looked more confident now. He wore clean clothes and carried himself like someone who belonged somewhere. The terrible fear that had haunted his mother's eyes was fading, slowly replaced by something like peace. "Are you ready?" Henry asked. "I do not know what ready means," replied in careful English. "But I am here. I am ready to be here." The opening ceremony brought together people from across Earth. Scientists, diplomats, teachers, common people who had followed Story and believed in what he represented. But there were also visitors from young who had heard the broadcast a year ago and felt something shift in their understanding of who they were. Cut the ribbon with Henry beside him and his mother watching with pride in her eyes. Cameras flashed. Journalists asked questions. But the boy handled it all with a quiet strength that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. Henry had become the director of the institute. His first act was to hire a diverse team of researchers and educators. They came from human nations and from colonies. The work of the institute was simple but profound: to study how different species could understand each other, and to find ways to build genuine connections across genetic lines. Had become a cultural liaison. She worked with both humans and explaining perspectives, translating not just languages but ideas and values. She traveled between worlds, spreading the message that connection was possible. The government did not officially support this work, but they had stopped actively destroying it. Some things in empires change slowly, one person at a time. 6 months after the institute opened, a new student arrived. Her name was Sira, and she had volunteered for a cultural exchange program, one of the first to do so officially. She was young and curious, and she asked questions that made older uncomfortable. Showed her around the institute. The boy had learned to navigate two worlds, and he moved between them with ease now. He explained human science in terms. He explained philosophy and human concepts. Sira watched him work, and something became clear to her. This boy was not broken. He was the future. They became friends quickly, as young people do when they share a sense of purpose. Neither was fully accepted by their own species, but together they seemed to belong somewhere. By the end of the exchange program, it was clear that something had begun between them. Nothing romantic, not yet, but the possibility was there. Lisa Morgan came to the institute to document the one-year anniversary. Her investigation into Daniel Cooper's death had won major awards. The government had never officially admitted to killing him, but the evidence was undeniable. Daniel's family had received compensation from Earth's governments. His name was honored. Lisa said when she interviewed the boy, "Do you ever wish things had been different? That your parents had been from the same species?" Thought about this question carefully. "My mother is," he said. "My father was human. They came from different worlds, but they made something beautiful together. I am proof that beautiful things can exist even when they are not supposed to. So no, I do not wish things were different. I am glad I am exactly what I am." Lisa smiled. She had found her story. It was not about conflict or tragedy, though both of those things had been true. Her story was about love and resilience and the stubborn human capacity to believe in something better. That evening, Henry stood in his office at the institute and looked out at the city beyond. Earth had changed. It was subtle, but it was there. Humans had learned that they could stand for something even when it was difficult. They had learned that a small boy could teach them courage. And something was changing too. Young were questioning their government's doctrine of genetic purity. They were listening to the ideas coming from Earth. Some of them, like Sira, were choosing to explore connection rather than isolation. Entered the office quietly. "Is sleeping," she said. "He asked about his father again today. I told him that his father would have been proud of who he is becoming." "His father would be," Henry said. They stood together in silence, looking out at the lights of the city. There was so much work still to do. There were governments to change. There were prejudices to overcome. There were centuries of fear and isolation to break down. But they had started. They had proven it was possible. "Thank you," said simply. "For what?" Henry asked. "For seeing me," replied. For believing that we mattered when everyone else said we could not exist." Henry thought back to that moment 15 years ago when had first arrived on Earth for the diplomatic exchange. He had simply been kind to her. He had asked her questions about her thoughts and feelings rather than treating her as a specimen. It had seemed like such a small thing at the time. But small acts of kindness rippled outward. They changed people. They changed worlds. 3 years later, and Sira were officially married in a ceremony that took place in neutral space, broadcast across both human and networks. The hybrid boy and the girl who questioned everything stood together and made vows that their children would grow up in a world more connected than the one they had inherited. The government did not approve, but they did not stop it either. And slowly, quietly, other hybrid families began to form. Other young people decided that connection was worth the cost of standing against tradition. The Institute for Cross-Species Understanding became more than just a place for research. It became a symbol that different beings could work together, that love could cross any barrier, that courage, when it comes from the heart, can change entire worlds. Grew into a man who carried the best of both his parents. He had his mother's strength and his father's curiosity. He had the logical mind of and the emotional depth of humans. He was what both species called impossible, and his existence was a challenge to every limit that had ever been set. But more than that, he was proof that the future could be different, that children could grow up knowing both their parents' worlds, that societies could change, slowly but surely, if someone was brave enough to stand up and say, "I am here, I exist, and I will not apologize for who I am." On a clear night, standing on a balcony that overlooked both Earth and the stars beyond, thought about the boy he had been, that frightened, hidden child who had run from world to world with his mother. That child seemed very far away now. But his mother was still beside him, older and tired from years of struggle, but finally at peace. And she placed her hand on his shoulder, the same gesture of protection she had used when he was small. "We made it," she said quietly. "We did," agreed. And below them, Earth turned. On its surface, a new generation grew up knowing stories of a woman and a boy who had taught the world that love was stronger than law, that a child's courage could move nations, that what was said to be impossible could be made real through belief and persistence. The aliens could not bear life, the scientists had said. But one alien female returned with a son, and that son, more than anyone else, taught humanity what it truly meant to live. The story was not over, it was only beginning.